Human biology is officially classified as a weapon, reaches its dramatic peak when Dr. Leora Vendek, facing a hostile tribunal, transforms her trial into a powerful demonstration. As judges watch in stunned silence, she harnesses the very biological capabilities deemed dangerous to create life-saving treatments. While Gorath's unexpected declaration of a sacred life debt forces the Council to reconsider humanity's potential, not as destroyers, but as healers. The crystalline corridors of Aurelia Prime shimmered with the ambient light of distant stars. Dr. Leora Vendek paused at the viewport, watching the docking bays below, where vessels of a dozen different configurations were disgorging passengers. From this height, the various species appeared as mere dots of color. Cerulean ceruli, with their towering frames, rust-colored wrath, with their powerful builds, and the glowing solari, whose skin emitted a soft phosphorescence. And then, there were the humans, indistinguishable at this distance, unremarkable in their physical appearance, yet now classified as biological weapons. Leora straightened her academic robes, adjusting the insignia that marked her as a xenobiologist. The message from the Academy Directorate had been cryptic. Report immediately for emergency appointment. Bring credentials. Human expertise required. She had expected many things upon her arrival at the most prestigious interspecies educational institution in the quadrant. Being appointed to teach comparative bioweaponry had not been one of them. Nervous, Professor Vendek? The voice was melodic, almost musical, characteristic of the Solari. Leora turned to find Administrator Nalara, her new supervisor, floating toward her. The Solari moved with the grace of dancers. Their bodies evolved for a world of shallow seas and constant currents. Realistic, Leora replied with a thin smile. I understand the circumstances of my appointment. Nalara's bioluminescent patterns shifted to a sympathetic blue. The Council's decision to reclassify human biology has created complications. But your credentials are impeccable, and we need someone who understands both sides of the equation. Both sides being humans as ordinary sentients and humans as walking arsenals. Leora couldn't keep the edge from her voice. Politics, Nalara said with a dismissive gesture that sent ripples of light cascading down her arms. Come. Your first lecture begins in 20 minutes. The students are eager. Eager wasn't the word Leora would have chosen as they entered the lecture hall. The three distinct species sat in clearly delineated sections, each maintaining distance from the others as much as from her. The ceruli occupied the highest tiers, their elongated skulls housing brains evolved for pure cognition, their expressions distant and analytical. The wrath had claimed territory near the exits, muscular frames tensed as if ready for conflict, their reptilian eyes tracking her every movement. The Solari formed a buffer zone between them, their empathic fields visibly rippling with the tension in the room. Not a single human student was present. The new regulations had seen to that. Distinguished scholars, Leora began, activating the holographic display. Welcome to Advanced Comparative Bioweaponry. I am Dr. Leora Vendek, formerly of the Earth Xenobiology Institute. A ceruli in the back row raised a slender appendage. Formerly. Earth institutions are under review for security clearance, Leora replied evenly. My appointment here is provisional. As all human appointments should be, came a muttered comment from the wrath section. Leora pretended not to hear. Today we begin with a fundamental question. What constitutes a biological weapon? Is it intent, capability, or merely potential? The holographic display blossomed with images. The neurotoxin sacs of the extinct Mergian mantis. The sonic attack chambers of Jovian deep whales. The pheromone control systems of the Arcturus hive minds. Each of these evolutionary adaptations serves both defensive and offensive purposes, she continued. Yet none of these species are classified as weapons themselves, Only their specific adaptations are regulated under galactic accords. She was about to advance to the next slide when the lecture hall's communication system chimed with the unmistakable tone of a council broadcast. The holographic display automatically switched to the feed, showing the Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council. The Secretary General, a cerule of impressive age, stood at the central podium. Citizens of the Galactic Alliance. The Secretary General's voice resonated through the room. After extensive review of classified intelligence and biohazard assessments, the Security Council has reached a unanimous decision, effective immediately. All human cadets, personnel, and civilian residents are reclassified as biological weapons, subject to quarantine and disarmament protocols as outlined in Amendment 7.3 of the Weapons Limitation Treaty. The lecture hall erupted. Several cerule students immediately began applauding, their slender hands creating a dry, clicking sound. The Wrath growled, some in approval, others in what seemed like disappointment at lost opportunities for combat. The Solari's bioluminescence dimmed dramatically, their empathic fields contracting in what Leora recognized as distress. This is not a punitive measure, the Secretary General continued, but a necessary precaution. Humans harbor biological capabilities that, when networked or enhanced, represent a clear and present danger to interspecies peace. All academic institutions are directed to isolate human students and faculty for processing. Detailed protocols will follow. The feed cut off, plunging the hall into momentary silence before chaos truly erupted. Students began rushing for the exits, some shouting questions, others demands. Through the commotion, Leora noticed a small group of cerule professors at the far entrance, their expressions conveying what in their species passed for satisfaction. Administrator Nalara materialized at her side, the Solari's skin now pulsing with alarmed crimson patterns. We must get you to secure quarters immediately. The quarantine protocols. Will turn me from professor to specimen, Leora finished, gathering her materials with deliberate calmness she did not feel. Nalara, this is absurd. Humans have been part of the Alliance for 70 years. We've served on every scientific and diplomatic mission. What could possibly— It's the synchronicity studies, Nalara whispered, guiding her toward a service exit as security drones began to appear at the main doors. The Council believes they've discovered something about human physiology that's been hidden all along. Leora's mind raced through possibilities. Our adrenal system? The neurochemical response to threat? That's basic fight or flight biology. Every sentient species has some version. Not like yours, Nalara said grimly. Come, there isn't much time. They slipped through maintenance corridors, avoiding the main thoroughfares where security would be heaviest. Nalara's bioluminescence dimmed to near darkness, allowing them to move like shadows. When they reached the faculty residential wing, Leora was surprised to find her quarters unguarded, though a glowing quarantine field had already been established around the doorway. They'll be back with proper containment equipment, Nalara said. The initial announcement always precedes the actual enforcement by several hours. Council bureaucracy. You have perhaps 2 standard cycles to decide. Decide what? Whether to fight this scientifically or politically. Nalara's large eyes met hers. The Academy Board is divided. Some see this as an opportunity to study human biology more thoroughly. Others recognize it as the political maneuver it is. Leora felt a chill. And you? I am Solari. We sense truth in emotions, not politics. Nalara's skin briefly glowed with warm colors. You are no weapon, Leora Vendek, but you may need to become one to fight this. With that cryptic statement, the administrator slipped away, leaving Leora alone at the threshold of her quarantined quarters. She passed through the field, feeling the familiar tingle of biometric scanners cataloging every cell of her body as she entered. Inside, Her personal terminal was blinking with dozens of messages, colleagues expressing shock, students asking questions, administration issuing containment directives. But one message stood out, unmarked by any official seal or identification. It simply read, Laboratory 7, Subsection C. The truth about human weaponization. Midnight. Leora stared at the message, weighing her options. Compliance meant indefinite quarantine, possibly forced research participation. Resistance meant becoming a fugitive on a space station with nowhere to run. Investigation, however dangerous, offered the only path to understanding. Her decision crystallized with surprising clarity. If human biology was now classified as a weapon, she would need to understand exactly what kind of weapon the Council feared. And for that, she needed allies who could move freely where she could not. She composed 3 separate messages, each carefully worded to appeal to different motivations. To Takral, a brilliant but skeptical Cerulli student whose analytical mind might overcome his species' prejudice. To Sarah, a young Solari whose empathic abilities made her unusually receptive to human emotions. And to Gorath, a wrath whose initial hostility had gradually softened after Leora had treated a training injury others had dismissed. The messages were simple. Seeking research assistance for classified project on interspecies biology. Significant academic credit. Laboratory 7C, 23:45 Standard Time. Then, she began methodically gathering supplies, sample kits, basic analytical tools, anything that might pass as ordinary research equipment. Whatever awaited in Laboratory 7C, she intended to be prepared. The ventilation system hummed quietly as the station's artificial day cycle dimmed toward evening. And Leora Vendek, human xenobiologist, now officially classified as a biological weapon, began planning her resistance. The service corridors of Aurelia Prime were designed for maintenance drones, not for faculty members navigating them after curfew. Leora moved cautiously, grateful for the architectural oversight that had placed most security sensors at heights appropriate for the taller Cerulli. Each intersection required careful scanning. The temporary quarantine might limit her movements, but it was the permanent guard she truly needed to avoid. Laboratory 7C was located in the older section of the station. Part of the original research complex built before the Academy had expanded to its current prestige. Unlike the crystalline transparency of the main facilities, these corridors were utilitarian metal, the lighting dim and flickering, perfect for clandestine meetings. She arrived first, using her faculty override to unlock the laboratory. The space was dusty, but fully equipped. Likely a backup facility kept operational, but rarely used. Leora quickly activated the basic systems, careful to keep power usage below the thresholds that would trigger automatic logging. At precisely 23:45, the door slid open to admit Trail. The Cerulli student moved with characteristic precision, his elongated fingers already holding a data tablet. Professor Vendek, he acknowledged with a slight inclination of his large cranium. I have calculated 17 distinct scenarios that would explain this meeting. 16 involve violations of the new quarantine protocols. And the 17th? Leora asked, continuing to prepare the lab station. The 17th assumes you are operating under classified directives to test student loyalty. Takral replied. That scenario has a probability of less than 7%, but it was sufficient to justify my attendance. Before Leora could respond, the door opened again. Sarah entered. Her Solari bioluminescence deliberately dimmed to avoid detection. Behind her came Gorath, the massive wrath having to duck slightly to clear the doorway. You came, Leora said, genuinely surprised to see all 3. Your distress signals are broadcasting on multiple empathic frequencies, Sarah said softly. I could feel them from my dormitory. Gorath simply grunted, his scaled arms crossed defensively. Explain why we should risk association with a newly classified weapon species. Leora took a deep breath. Because that classification is either a mistake or a deliberate manipulation, and I need your help to prove which. She activated the central display, showing the same message that had led her here. Someone in this station knows why humans have suddenly been reclassified. They've invited me to discover the truth. But as you've noted, I'm now subject to restriction. I need you three to be my eyes, ears, and hands outside quarantine. Illegal, Tekrell noted dispassionately. Punishment for abetting quarantine evasion includes academic expulsion. And what of punishment for allowing scientific falsehood to dictate policy? Leora countered. Tekrell, you're the finest analytical mind in your cohort. Doesn't it strike you as statistically improbable that after 7 decades of human integration, we would suddenly be classified as biological weapons without new evidence? The Cerule's fingers twitched, their equivalent of thoughtful consideration. The timing does present anomalies. I will help, Sarah said simply. The fear surrounding this declaration, it doesn't feel organic. It feels manufactured. They all turned to Gorath, who had remained silent. His reptilian eyes narrowed in consideration. Wrath respects strength, he finally said. Humans have always been physically inferior to us. Yet you survive. If your biology harbors weapons we have not detected. I wish to understand them. His lipless mouth formed what might have been a smile. For academic purposes, of course. The laboratory door slid open again. All 4 turned, expecting security forces. But instead, a hooded figure entered, movements deliberate and unhurried. When the hood was lowered, Leora recognized Administrator Nalara, though the Solari's usually vibrant skin was muted to near monochrome. I see you received my message, Nalara said quietly, and assembled assistants. Good. We have little time. You sent the anonymous tip? Leora asked, surprised. The Academy Board is divided on this matter, Nalara explained, moving to the laboratory's secure terminal. Those of us who oppose the reclassification cannot act openly, but we can provide access. Her slender fingers danced across the interface, bypassing security protocols with administrative overrides. What I am about to show you is classified at the highest levels. Exposure means immediate dismissal for me, possibly worse. But the truth must be known. The display flickered, then resolved to show research footage. Human subjects in clinical settings, monitored by an array of sophisticated equipment. The subjects appeared to be military personnel, undergoing what looked like standard stress testing. Project Adrenal Resonance, Nalara narrated. A joint military research initiative between Human Forces and Council Security, begun 15 years ago. The premise was simple. Study how human stress responses might be optimized for combat situations. The footage advanced, showing paired human subjects now. Biometric data scrolled alongside, highlighting synchronized heart rates, hormone levels, neural activity. The researchers discovered something unexpected, Nalara continued. When humans operate in close proximity under stress conditions, their adrenal responses begin to synchronize. More importantly, they amplify each other's capabilities. Amplify how? Gorath asked, leaning forward with obvious interest. Increased strength, accelerated reaction time, enhanced resistance to pain and toxins. Nalara advanced the footage again. What began as a small effect with pairs became exponentially more powerful with groups. A squad of humans in full adrenal synchronization demonstrated capabilities exceeding our most optimistic projections. Leora studied the data carefully. This is just an extreme manifestation of social bonding behaviors. Many species experience performance enhancement when operating in groups. None that can increase physical capabilities by over 300%. Tekrell observed, his tone unusually animated as he analyzed the scrolling data. And none that can maintain such enhancement for extended durations without physiological damage. The final segment of footage showed an entire platoon of human soldiers moving with uncanny coordination, completing obstacle courses and combat simulations with efficiency that bordered on the superhuman. The project was terminated and classified 3 years ago, Nalara said, shutting down the display. The official reason was ethical concerns. The real reason was fear. The Council's military advisors realized that a properly conditioned human force could potentially outmatch any conventional defense. But that's absurd, Leora protested. This effect requires specific conditions, training. It's not something humans can just activate at will. Originally, no, Nalara agreed. But there have been rumors of biotech enhancements, neural interfaces that could artificially trigger and sustain the resonance effect. Theoretical models suggest a battalion of interface-enhanced humans could maintain peak combat efficiency indefinitely. Silence fell over the laboratory as they processed this information. So the Council fears not what humans are, Sarah said quietly, but what we might become. Precisely, Nalara confirmed. The reclassification is preventative, an attempt to control and contain before development advances further. Gorath made a rumbling sound deep in his chest. Cowardly. If humans possess such potential, let them demonstrate it in honorable combat. This isn't about combat, Leora said, her mind racing through implications. This is about balance of power. If humans can enhance themselves this way, other species will demand similar capabilities or greater restrictions. The critical question, Takral interjected, is whether this phenomenon is merely a scientific curiosity or a genuine security concern. We require additional data. Nalara nodded. That's why I brought you here. This laboratory has equipment capable of measuring the resonance effect. If we can study it objectively, document its limitations and requirements, perhaps we can demonstrate it's not the threat they fear. Or confirm that it is, Gorath added bluntly. Leora looked at each of them in turn, the calculating Ceruli, the empathic Solari, the warrior Wrath, and the administrator risking her career. Strange allies for a strange situation. Then we have our research project, she decided. Takral will analyze the existing data, looking for patterns and constraints. Sarah will monitor emotional states during testing. The resonance effect seems tied to specific stress responses. Gorath will help design physical benchmarks to measure enhancement. And she hesitated. I will be the test subject. Too risky, Nalara objected. If you're caught outside quarantine... I'm already outside quarantine, Leora pointed out. And we need a human subject. Unless you know others willing to volunteer? The silence was answer enough. Then, it's settled, Leora said with finality. We meet here each night. During daytime, maintain normal routines. Takral, use your academic access to gather what research you can on adrenal systems across species. Make it seem like ordinary coursework. Sarah, your empathic abilities may let you identify other faculty sympathetic to our cause. Gorath, your physical training sessions give you access to the military wing. Observe any unusual security around human personnel. As they each nodded agreement, the laboratory suddenly seemed less a hiding place and more a center of resistance. Small, yes. Under-equipped, certainly. But it was a start. One final thing, Leora added. Whatever we discover, whether human biology truly represents a weapon or not, we pursue the truth. No agenda, no preconceptions. Agreed? One by one, they voiced agreement, even Gorath giving a solemn nod. As they prepared to depart in staggered intervals to avoid detection, Leora felt a strange sense of purpose. She had come to Aurelia Prime to teach. Now, she found herself at the center of a controversy that might reshape humanity's place in the galaxy. The irony wasn't lost on her. In attempting to disprove humans were weapons. She had just assembled the most diverse arsenal she could imagine. The days that followed settled into a dangerous rhythm. During daylight hours, Leora endured the increasing restrictions of quarantine, mandatory medical scans, limited access to academy resources, constant surveillance. Her lectures continued under heavy security. The curriculum now strictly controlled and focused on historical bioweaponry rather than current research. But at night, Laboratory 7C became their sanctuary and research center. Each of her unlikely allies brought valuable data. Takral had accessed the Academy's restricted xenobiology archives, pulling comparative studies on adrenal systems across 27 species. Sarah had discreetly identified 3 faculty members with reservations about the Council's decree. Gorth had observed a new security detail around the Human Military Liaison Office, confirmation that something significant was happening beyond the public announcements. Their own experiments progressed slowly, but yielded intriguing results. Using the laboratory's medical equipment, they had confirmed the basic premise of adrenal resonance. When Leora was subjected to controlled stress stimuli, her physiological responses showed the expected spikes in adrenaline, cortisol, and associated neural activity. But the truly fascinating data emerged when Sarah attempted to empathically connect during these episodes. "It's like a feedback loop," the young Solari explained, her skin pulsing with excited patterns as she reviewed the readings. "When I synchronize with your emotional state, your adrenal output increases by approximately 12%. Even more interesting, my own biochemistry shows subtle shifts toward a human-like response pattern." Cross-species resonance, Takral noted, his long fingers manipulating the data displays. Unprecedented in the literature. The implications for xenobiology are significant. Gorth, who had been monitoring the physical performance metrics, grunted in agreement. "The strength enhancement is modest but measurable. Reaction time improvements more substantial. But none of this explains the Council's extreme reaction," Leora said, frowning at the data. "These effects are interesting, but hardly warrant classifying an entire species as weapons. Unless..." Nalara, who had joined them when her administrative duties allowed, trailed off thoughtfully. "Unless what?" Leora prompted. "Unless they've discovered that the effect can be artificially enhanced," the administrator suggested. "The original research you saw involved paired subjects. What if someone has found a way to network multiple humans together, amplifying the resonance exponentially?" Takral's head tilted in that peculiar cerulea expression of intense calculation. "Theoretically feasible. Neural interface technology has advanced considerably in recent years. A properly designed system could potentially create a cascading enhancement effect across dozens or even hundreds of subjects." "A battalion of super soldiers," Gorth said, unable to keep the approval from his voice. "The Wrath culture valued martial prowess above all else." "Or a medical breakthrough," Leora countered, an idea forming. "If the resonance effect enhances physical capabilities, could it also accelerate healing, boost immune response, fight toxins?" This new perspective energized their research. Over the next several days, they shifted focus, examining how the adrenal resonance might be applied therapeutically. Sarah's empathic abilities proved crucial, as she could safely induce mild stress responses in Leora without harmful stimuli. Their breakthrough came unexpectedly. During one session, while monitoring Leora's cellular regeneration rates under resonance conditions, Sarah suddenly collapsed, her luminescent skin flaring brilliant white before fading to a sickly gray. "Sarah!" Leora rushed to the young Solari's side, medical scanner already in hand. The readings were alarming, massive disruption to Sarah's unique biochemistry, as if her cells were caught between 2 incompatible states. "Empathic overload," Takral diagnosed clinically, though his movements betrayed unusual urgency. "She synchronized too deeply with your adrenal state and triggered a cascade failure in her own system." Gorth moved with surprising gentleness for his size, helping to transfer Sarah to the laboratory's medical bed. "Her life signs are weakening. Solari physiology is not designed to handle human stress hormones. Leora felt cold dread settling in her stomach. Their unsanctioned research had just endangered one of their own. We need to get her to the medical bay. Impossible, Nalara said grimly. Any official treatment would require explaining what caused this condition. We would all face serious consequences. Then we treat her here, Leora decided, already accessing the laboratory's pharmaceutical synthesizer. To Krail, your xenobiology knowledge. What compounds will stabilize Solari physiology under hormonal stress? The Ceruli hesitated only briefly before joining her at the console, his fingers flying across the interface with precise movements. Polyphasic stabilizers, ionic buffers calibrated to Solari cellular structure, but we lack the raw materials for synthesis. No, we don't, Leora said, rolling up her sleeve. Use my blood. Human plasma contains compatible proteins that can be modified. Dangerous, Takral warned. Your quarantine status means any biological material from you is classified as potentially hazardous. More dangerous than letting her die? Leora challenged, already preparing the extraction equipment. This is exactly what the Council fears. Not that humans are weapons, but that we might choose when and how to deploy ourselves. No one argued further. Leora extracted a significant blood sample, which Takrel immediately began processing through the synthesizer. Gorith maintained a vigilant watch at the door, while Nalara monitored Sarah's deteriorating condition. Hours passed in tense work. The synthesizer hummed as it extracted, modified, and recombined components from Leora's blood. Takral's expertise proved invaluable, his encyclopedic knowledge of xenobiology allowing for precise calibration of the treatment. By the time the synthesizer chimed completion, Sarah's bioluminescence had dimmed to near invisibility. It is ready, Takral announced, carefully removing the vial of iridescent fluid. But administration must be precise. Solari circulatory systems are diffuse rather than centralized. Leora took the vial, hands steady despite her exhaustion. Guide me. Under Takral's direction, she administered the treatment through multiple injection sites across Sarah's translucent skin. For several agonizing minutes, there was no response. Then, gradually, a faint glow began to return to the Solari's extremities, slowly spreading inward toward her core. It's working, Nalara breathed, the administrator's own bioluminescence brightening in relief. By morning, Sarah had stabilized, though she remained unconscious. They arranged for her to be returned to her quarters, with Nalara creating documentation for a minor research accident to explain her absence from classes. The experience had shaken all of them, but it had also provided something unexpected, proof that human biology could heal as effectively as it could harm. We've been approaching this all wrong, Leora realized as they cleaned the laboratory, erasing evidence of their night's work. We've been trying to disprove the weapon classification rather than acknowledging and redirecting it. Explain, Gorith prompted, his reptilian features unreadable. Every adaptation that makes human adrenal responses potentially dangerous also makes them potentially beneficial, Leora said, her fatigue giving way to clarity. The same resonance effect that could enhance soldiers could enhance healers. What if, instead of fighting the classification, we propose a new framework? Humans not as offensive weapons, but as medical assets. Takral considered this, his large cranium tilted. Recontextualization, rather than refutation. Intriguing approach, though the Council's security concerns would remain. Then we address them directly, Leora decided. We need to prepare a formal presentation for the Council, showing both the risks and benefits, proposing ethical guidelines and oversight mechanisms. The Council will not simply reverse its decree based on a presentation, Nalara cautioned, especially one from a quarantined subject. No, Leora agreed. But if we can demonstrate practical benefits As we did with Sarah, we create a narrative too valuable to dismiss. She looked at each of them in turn. This isn't just about clearing humanity's name anymore. It's about finding the right place for us in the galactic community. They were discussing strategy when the laboratory doors suddenly slid open with the distinctive override tone of security protocols. Standing in the doorway was a full detail of Council security forces, led by a stern Ceruli official whose insignia marked him as part of the BioGuard, the Council's specialized unit for handling biological threats. Dr. Leora Vendek, the official announced formally. You are in violation of quarantine protocols established under Council Directive 7.3. These individuals, he gestured to her companions, are charged with abetting quarantine evasion and unauthorized handling of restricted biological materials. Security drones moved into the laboratory, scanners already documenting the equipment they'd been using. One drone hovered directly over the synthesizer, which still contained traces of Leora's blood. "How did you find us?" Nalara demanded, her administrator's authority momentarily asserting itself. "An energy spike consistent with medical synthesis equipment," the BioGuard officer replied. "All such activities involving human biological material are now automatically flagged for investigation." Leora stepped forward, deliberately placing herself between the security forces and her colleagues. "I take full responsibility. These individuals were acting under my direction as research assistants in a properly sanctioned project. No sanctioned projects involve quarantine species working directly with non-quarantine personnel," the officer countered. "Additionally, our scans indicate Solari biochemical disruption, consistent with adrenal contamination. Evidence of weaponized deployment." "That's absurd," Gorath growled, his powerful frame tensing. "We were treating an accident, not deploying weapons." The officer ignored him, gesturing to the security drones. "Confiscate all research materials and equipment for analysis. Dr. Vendek is to be placed in Level 3 containment, pending tribunal review. The others will be detained for questioning and decontamination." As the drones began systematically dismantling their work, Leora felt a moment of genuine despair. Not for herself, she had known the risks, but for the truth they had been uncovering. The nuanced reality of human biology, neither entirely benign nor inherently weaponized, would be lost in the bureaucratic machinery of the Council's security apparatus. As she was led away, isolation field already forming around her, she caught one last glimpse of her unlikely research team. Tekrell's calculating gaze suggested he was already formulating alternative strategies. Gorath's posture communicated restrained power, willing to act, but awaiting the right moment. Nalara's administrator's composure had returned. Her bioluminescence settled into determined patterns. They weren't defeated yet, just entering a new phase of their resistance. The containment facility was clinically sterile, designed to house biological threats rather than sentient beings. Leora's cell, though officially termed a specialized habitat, was surrounded by sophisticated monitoring equipment that tracked every physiological parameter from heart rate to cellular respiration. The irony wasn't lost on her. In their attempt to study human biology, they had created the perfect environment for others to study her. 3 days passed in isolation. Her only contact came in the form of remote interrogations, conducted by BioGuard officials whose questions revealed more about their fears than their understanding. They were particularly fixated on the adrenal resonance phenomenon, demanding details about her experiments with Sarah. On the 4th day, the routine changed. Her cell door opened to admit Administrator Nalara, though the Solari was accompanied by 2 security drones. "You've been granted a tribunal hearing," Nalara announced formally, her bioluminescence carefully neutral. "The Council has agreed to review your case directly, rather than through standard security protocols." "How did you manage that?" Leora asked, surprised by this development. "Your research team has been persistent," Nalara replied. the faintest flicker of amusement crossing her features. Tukrail submitted 17 formal appeals, citing procedural irregularities in your detention. Gorath challenged the head of Academy Security to ritual combat, which was declined, but created significant administrative disruption. "And Sarah?" Leora asked anxiously. "Has she recovered?" "Fully," Nalara confirmed. "Her testimony regarding your treatment of her condition has been particularly effective in raising questions about the Council's approach." As they walked through the security corridors, flanked by the ever-present drones, Nalara subtly moved closer. "The hearing will not be fair," she murmured, barely audible. "The security faction has already decided. But it will be public. Use that." Before Leora could ask what she meant, they arrived at the station's formal tribunal chamber. Unlike the utilitarian security facilities, this space was designed to impress, soaring architecture reminiscent of the Grand Council chamber itself, with seating arranged in concentric circles around a central presentation area. Representatives from various species filled the observer sections, while a panel of 7 council officials occupied the elevated judgment seats. To Leora's surprise, she spotted her research team seated together in the witness section. Even more surprising was the presence of several human military officers in a cordoned area, their own quarantine field visibly in effect around them. The lead judge, a Cerulai of considerable age, activated the formal proceedings with a gesture that illuminated the chamber's recording systems. "This tribunal is convened to address violations of Council Directive 7.3 regarding the quarantine and control of classified biological weapons, specifically human adrenal resonance capabilities." The formal charges were read: quarantine violation, unauthorized experimentation, improper handling of restricted biological materials. Each carried penalties ranging from permanent detention to exile from council space. "How does the subject respond to these charges?" the judge inquired, using the clinical terminology that stripped Leora of personhood. She stepped forward, centering herself in the presentation area. "The subject requests permission to demonstrate the nature of human biology through practical example rather than verbal testimony." Murmurs spread through the chamber. This was clearly not the expected response. "Demonstration of weaponized capabilities is prohibited in tribunal settings." The security representative objected immediately. "Not weaponized capabilities," Leora countered. "Medical applications. I propose to show how the very aspects of human biology that have been classified as weapons can be directed toward healing." The judges conferred briefly before the lead judge responded. "The tribunal will permit a limited demonstration under strict security protocols. Any sign of dangerous deployment will result in immediate termination of the demonstration and maximum sentencing." Leora nodded, then turned to where her research team sat. "I require my research assistance for this demonstration." More consultation among the judges before reluctant approval was granted. Tukrail, Gorath, and Sarah were escorted to the central area, each passing through decontamination fields before joining her. "Tribunal officials, representatives, and observers," Leora began, her voice steady as laboratory equipment was brought forward under heavy guard. "The Council has classified human biology as a weapon based on a phenomenon called adrenal resonance, our ability to synchronize and enhance stress responses when in groups." She activated the central display, showing the data they had gathered over their nights of research. "This resonance effect does exist. When humans experience stress together, our bodies produce cascading hormonal responses that can enhance strength, speed, and resilience. In military applications, this could indeed create advantages in combat situations." The security representative looked smugly vindicated. "However," Leora continued, "this same physiological response can be directed toward healing, rather than harm." She gestured to Sarah. "My colleague experienced a severe biochemical disruption during our research. Using controlled adrenal resonance, we were able to synthesize a treatment that saved her life, when conventional medical interventions would have failed. Sarah stepped forward, her bioluminescence brightening to emphasize her health. I confirm this testimony. Dr. Vendek used her own biological materials to create a treatment specifically calibrated to my alien physiology, something our standard medical protocols could not have accomplished in time. Takral added his clinical assessment, presenting data that showed the precise mechanisms by which human blood components had been modified to stabilize Solari biochemistry. Even Gorath spoke, his warrior's perspective lending weight to the argument that strength could defend, as well as attack. The chamber had grown silent, observers now leaning forward with interest rather than fear. Leora seized the moment, advancing to her key proposal. I request permission to demonstrate a practical application, she said, indicating the equipment that had been brought in. Under controlled conditions, with full monitoring. After lengthy deliberation, the tribunal granted permission. What followed was carefully choreographed. Leora had briefed her team during the security escorts, using the pretense of scientific discussion to outline her plan. With Takral operating the equipment, Leora first established her baseline biochemistry. Then, with Sarah's empathic assistance, she induced a moderate stress response in herself, enough to trigger adrenal production without reaching dangerous levels. The monitors displayed her elevated heart rate, hormone production, and neural activity for all to see. Now, she announced, we channel this response through the medical synthesizer, calibrating it to treat specific conditions. The synthesizer hummed as it processed a small blood sample, guided by Takral's precise calculations. When complete, it had produced 3 distinct compounds, each designed to address different medical challenges. The first compound, Leora explained, accelerates cellular regeneration, particularly effective for radiation damage. She applied a small amount to a sample of damaged tissue cells, which the display showed rapidly reconstructing their cellular walls. The second counteracts neurotoxins. Gorath provided a sample of wrath venom, a controlled substance he had somehow acquired, though no one questioned this, which was neutralized on contact with the synthesized compound. The third, Leora said, her voice softening, stabilizes interspecies neural patterns. It could potentially treat conditions that arise when different species attempt deep empathic or neural connections. This last demonstration was the most dramatic. Sarah volunteered, allowing a small dose to be administered. Her bioluminescence, which had been fluctuating with the stress of the tribunal, suddenly stabilized into calm, harmonious patterns. Human biology is indeed powerful, Leora concluded, facing the tribunal directly. Like any powerful tool, it can be weaponized. But classification determines application. By labeling humans as weapons, the Council limits our potential to serve as healers, mediators, and allies. She gestured to the human military officers observing from their quarantine section. Even those trained for combat would rather defend than destroy. We ask not for unrestricted freedom, but for appropriate classification, one that acknowledges both risks and benefits. The tribunal chamber erupted in discussion. Representatives from medical guilds were particularly vocal, already calculating the potential applications for the treatments they had witnessed. Security officials remained skeptical, though some were clearly weighing the demonstrated benefits against theoretical risks. Unexpectedly, it was Gorath who created the decisive moment. The powerful Wrath stepped forward, his ceremonial posture indicating a formal declaration. I, Gorath, son of the 7th Clutch, declare life debt to the human Leora Vendek, he announced in the ritual cadence of his people. When others dismissed my combat injury as minor, she recognized the neural damage that would have ended my warrior path. Through her knowledge, her human biology, she restored what was damaged. The chamber fell silent. Life debts were sacred in Wrath culture, acknowledged and respected across the council. I ask the tribunal, Gorath continued, his reptilian voice resonating through the silence. How can that which heals be classified only as that which harms? The judges conferred at length, their discussion animated though conducted through encrypted channels invisible to observers. Finally, the lead judge activated the formal pronouncement system. This tribunal recognizes the complexity of the matter before us. The announcement began. The evidence presented demonstrates both potential security concerns and significant medical applications regarding human biological capabilities. Leora held her breath, acutely aware of how much rested on the next words. Therefore, by authority of the Galactic Council, we issue the following revision to Directive 7.3. Human biology is reclassified as conditionally regulated biotech, subject to oversight, but not blanket restriction. All humans currently under quarantine will be released to standard security protocols. Relief flooded through Leora, though she maintained her composed expression as the judge continued. Furthermore, we authorize the establishment of a humanitarian biotech corps, a specialized division combining human biological capabilities with multi-species medical expertise. This corps will operate under council oversight, with clearly defined ethical parameters. The judge looked directly at Leora. Dr. Leora Vendek, in recognition of your research and demonstration, you are appointed acting director of the Humanitarian Biotech Corps, effective immediately. Your research team will form the initial scientific advisory committee. The pronouncement concluded with detailed protocols for implementation, but Leora barely heard them. The weight that had pressed upon her since the initial classification was lifting, replaced by the entirely different weight of responsibility. As the tribunal dissolved into administrative discussions, her team gathered around her. Takral, already calculating resource requirements. Sarah, glowing with anticipation. Gorath, standing protectively nearby. And Administrator Nalara, watching with quiet satisfaction. "You did it," Nalara said softly. "You turned a weapon into a shield." "No," Leora corrected, looking at each of them in turn. "We did it, and our work is just beginning." The weeks that followed brought rapid change to Aurelia Prime. The quarantine barriers came down, replaced by more nuanced security protocols, focused on specific applications rather than blanket restrictions. Human students returned to classes, though now with additional coursework on the ethical use of their biological capabilities. The newly formed Humanitarian Biotech Corps established its headquarters in the station's medical wing, with research facilities that dwarfed their clandestine laboratory. Leora found herself at the center of a transformation larger than she had anticipated. The Corps quickly attracted volunteers from across species, scientists, healers, and even security personnel interested in defensive applications. Takral was appointed Chief Research Coordinator, his analytical mind perfectly suited to managing the complex web of projects that sprouted from their initial discoveries. Sarah became the liaison to the Solari empathic community, developing protocols for safe interaction between human adrenal systems and alien empathic fields. Gorath, to everyone's surprise, requested assignment as security director, arguing that one who understood both the potential and the risk was best positioned to establish appropriate safeguards. 3 months after the tribunal hearing, Leora stood on an observation deck overlooking the docking bay, where a Corps medical vessel was preparing to depart. The ship would carry a mixed team of human and alien healers to an outer colony suffering from a mineral plague, a condition that had previously been considered untreatable, but which their new synthetic compounds showed promise in addressing. "Quite a view, isn't it?" came a familiar melodic voice. Leora turned to find Nalara joining her at the viewport, the administrator's bioluminescence reflecting the stars beyond the station. From quarantined weapon to healing fleet in one standard quarter, Leora mused. "Not what I expected when I arrived here. The best transformations rarely are," Nalara replied. "Though I should inform you that not everyone is pleased with the current arrangement." "The security faction?" Leora guessed. The Council's military advisors had been notably cool toward the Corps, despite its strictly humanitarian mandate. "Among others," Nalara confirmed. There was a closed session of the Strategic Committee yesterday. I'm not supposed to know about it, much less inform you. But the Solari's skin rippled with mischievous patterns. Administrators have our ways. What are they planning? Leora asked, suddenly alert. Nothing immediate, Nalara assured her. But there are concerns that the humanitarians, as they're calling you, represent a new power center outside traditional military or political structures. Your ability to cross species barriers, both literally and metaphorically, makes some established authorities nervous. Leora sighed, watching as the medical vessel's engines began their warm-up sequence. We're healers, not revolutionaries. Perhaps, Nalara said thoughtfully. But healing sometimes requires changing the established order. Your very existence challenges assumptions about how species should interact, how biology defines destiny. They watched in silence as the vessel departed, its sleek form diminishing against the starfield. There was one other item from the closed session, Nalara added, her tone careful. Intelligence reports suggest another species has been studying the adrenal resonance phenomenon with great interest. The Vakari Dominion has apparently been conducting their own parallel research, though with considerably less ethical oversight. The Vakari, a species known for their biological adaptability and expansionist tendencies. Not officially enemies of the Council, but certainly not allies. They want what we have? Leora asked, though she already knew the answer. They want what they believe you have, Nalara corrected. A biological advantage that could be weaponized. They don't yet understand that the true power lies not in the biology itself, but in how it's directed. Leora considered this new complication. Should I be concerned about Vakari infiltration, espionage? The Council security services are monitoring the situation, Nalara assured her. But I thought you should know. The path you've chosen, turning potential weapons into healing tools, may face challenges from those who see only the weapon aspect. Then we'll need to be more convincing, Leora said with determination. Every life we save, every condition we treat, builds the case for our approach. Nalara's bioluminescence brightened in approval. I was right about you. You know, when we first met, I sensed you would change things here. I just didn't realize how profound that change would be. Later that evening, Leora hosted a small gathering in her quarters, now substantially expanded to accommodate her new role. Takral arrived precisely on time, bringing detailed reports on their latest research developments. Sarah came shortly after, her bioluminescence reflecting the festive mood. Gorath appeared last, uncomfortable in formal attire, but making the effort out of respect for the occasion. They had become more than colleagues, forged into a team by shared purpose and mutual respect that transcended their biological differences. As they shared a meal featuring dishes from each of their homeworlds, conversation flowed easily between scientific discourse and personal connections. A toast, Leora proposed, raising her glass. To unexpected alliances and unintended consequences. To biology that heals rather than harms, Sarah added, her luminescence pulsing warmly. To worthy challenges, Gorath rumbled approvingly. To statistically improbable success. Takral concluded with what, for a Ceruli, passed as humor. As their glasses clinked together, Leora felt a profound sense of purpose. The classification of human biology as a weapon had been intended as a restriction, a containment measure. Instead, it had become the catalyst for something new, a recognition that power, properly directed, could heal as readily as it could harm. Outside the viewport, the stars of the galaxy stretched endlessly, each potentially orbited by worlds with their own unique biologies, their own strengths and vulnerabilities. Somewhere among them, the Vakari were watching, calculating, perhaps planning. Other challenges would inevitably arise. The humanitarian biotech core would face skepticism, resistance, even fear. But for now, in this moment, surrounded by allies who had once been strangers. Leora Vendek, human xenobiologist, officially classified biological asset, and director of an interspecies healing initiative, allowed herself to feel optimistic about the future they were building together. Human biology remained powerful, potentially dangerous in the wrong applications, but it was no longer just a weapon to be feared. It had become a tool for healing, for connection, for progress. And that transformation, Leora reflected, as she looked at her diverse team, was perhaps the most powerful capability of all.